Hello everyone and welcome to this Global Fleet Champions webinar on driver mental health and wellbeing. If you're new to our webinars, Global Fleet Champions is a partnership campaign administered by Break, the road safety charity, to prevent deaths, injuries and pollution caused by vehicles driven for work. To learn more about the work that we do and to sign up for free to be a Global Fleet Champion, giving you access to fleet safety resources and more events, please visit globalfleetchampions.org. And during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, we know there are all sorts of changes and challenges facing many of your organisations and your staff, including your at-work drivers. So our spotlight sessions are short, focused webinars providing insight to a specific topic relevant to your fleet safety programme. And today's spotlight session has two speakers who will be discussing driver mental health and wellbeing and what you can do to support your drivers and yourself. So on to our first speaker today. I'm delighted to introduce Tricia Hendry. Tricia is a writer and national educator specialising in issues relating to mental health, trauma, professional self-care and resilience. Formerly Deputy Chief Executive of Skylight, she currently works independently for a range of government, private and NGO clients. She's faced trauma and tragedy personally, and her work aims to assist people to get through the tough times that life throws at them.
Well, hello from Miramar in Wellington, New Zealand. It's an honour to share this next 30 minutes or so with you. This week here in New Zealand, I actually heard someone say on the radio that our truck and delivery drivers provide the lifeblood of our New Zealand economy at the moment, and always have, of course. You know, as you would know, truck drivers, van drivers, courier drivers, drivers of all kinds move around products, move around people at times, and make so much possible for every community and every population. We know that even at the best of times, being a driver comes with very unique pressures, very unique challenges. It's a really unique job. You'll know also that there are plenty of drivers who love their work, really love their work. Some of the challenges might be long hours sitting in the cab, spending time on the road away from loved one, away from their home. Sometimes there are deadlines to meet which can be challenging. Sometimes grabbing food, grabbing rest, grabbing sleep, sometimes at odd times. Sometimes not enough sleep. It can be lonely at times, it can feel isolating at times. But also, drivers have to deal with other drivers, other people who perhaps haven't had the same safety training. They share the road. They also have to encounter every kind of weather, as you would know, all kinds of road conditions. And there's always that safety risk, because when you're driving a vehicle that potentially could be the cause or involved in a crash incident. And there's always a risk of not only damage to vehicles, of course, but to people, injuries, and at worst, fatalities. And then while drivers have all these things happening, along comes the coronavirus, just to make life even more complicated. So much change so fast here in New Zealand and around the world. And I was very amused to hear again on the radio recently that we should be thinking about our truck drivers, our van drivers, our delivery drivers as heroic as those in our health services, because so many companies are going above and beyond to deliver the goods, to deliver the food to the supermarkets, to deliver parcels, to keep economies going despite lockdown and restrictions. Today I've been asked to speak about driver mental health on the road, and I'm wondering, what that means to you. We've only got a short time together, so I've put together a PDF of notes, which will be also available to you. So every thing that you see on this presentation will be available as a PDF to keep on record or use with your teams. Okay, so all of us at any one time, we move along a continuum of mental health and well-being. Down one end, we have really positive, healthy mental functioning, good mental health, a high level of mental well-being, that's the green end. Down the other end, it's not such a pretty picture. We can find our mental health functioning as very poor. We're mentally unhealthy, and our lives can become seriously disrupted by this. There can be a complete absence of mental well-being, and possibly for some it can include suicidality. Now, all of us, whatever our profession, whatever our role, whatever stage in life, we move backwards and forwards along this continuum. You know, we all have our good days and our bad days, and we all have situations that can be challenging. I was just before this webinar, I was speaking to a young health worker who was talking to me about how pressured she was feeling. So you could imagine that she was moving towards the orange part, where she was feeling a lot of stress, and you will know there are a lot of people at the moment around the world experiencing that. Not the least, probably, the delivery drivers. So where on this scale would you want your truckers, your delivery drivers to be? Would you want them to be towards the green end with good mental health, thriving, their brain function working really, really well? Or does it matter to you or not that they might be down that severe end, that disruptive end? All of us have got brains. They just sit, you know, somewhere here. You're all using them right now. We take them for granted every day. And we've all got bodies, and we're a lot more at home talking about our physical health, our body health. But, you know, without a brain, we would have no physical health. Our brain is our base camp. Our brain it's through our brain that everything functions. And we want to make sure that our brain processing is as healthy as our body processing. They go together in lots of ways. Research is really clear that very high stress levels, fatigue, and mental unwellness in drivers can be dangerous for them and for others, and even for a business. You will know, I'm sure, the dangers of fatigue, that terrible dragging, that inability to concentrate, forgetfulness, high stress levels caused by deadlines, caused by possibly really tight schedules, particularly at the moment with the demands of the economy as it is right now. And if a driver also develops a mental condition, it might be high levels of anxiety, it might be something like panic attacks, it could be something like depression or any other mental unwellness. Altogether, these things can become really dangerous for them personally, for them professionally, and for others they share the road with, for colleagues, and for the business. We know, research is really clear, that really continued high levels of stress, high levels of fatigue, lack of sleep, lack of rest, as well as mental unwellness, significantly increases risks of crashes, injuries, and potentially fatalities. And I'm sure you're very aware of that. It puts drivers' lives at risk of poorer personal health outcomes, so their physical outcomes, their physical health, but also ongoing mental unwellness, and potentially, sadly, in some instances, suicidal thinking, and for some, death by suicide, which is right at the end, of course, of that continuum I just talked about. These things also increase the rate of staff turnover, which comes with staff resignations, where people feel they can't cope with their work anymore. This impacts the work plans, the work delivery plans, the work schedules, when people are no longer able to do their role, which of course affects the financial bottom line, but it also affects the morale of the whole team, not just the driving team, but all of your business's team. So, how can you, as a workplace leader, as an employer, how can you recognize the signs that drivers might be struggling with mental unwellness of some kind? In other words, how can you recognize the sign that they're moving more towards the yellow and then the orange part of that mental health and wellbeing continuum, that they're moving away from thriving and being really well. What is it that you need to look for? Well, obviously there would be many signs that might indicate this, and everybody's different. But I'm guessing you know your drivers. Your team leaders know their drivers in particular. So there may be some behavioural changes that start to become obvious. At first, they might be subtle, and you might not be able to see them so readily. But over time, and sometimes quite quickly, depending on this person's situation, you might see things like a person has a shorter temper, a shorter fuse. They become more irritable than usual. It might be more irritable with your work team, more irritable with customers. They might be more easily upset by others. It might become obvious that someone's mood is swinging a lot, where perhaps they have always had a pretty steady mood. Maybe they're moving between frustration and irritability, flatness, sadness, and you're never quite sure what they're going to be like on any one day. Another thing that can happen is that you might see signs that someone is having great difficulty focusing, trouble concentrating on the tasks that they have to do, on the schedule, on steps they need to take, on records they need to keep. They might be becoming obviously more and more forgetful. They might be showing that they're finding it hard to make decisions, even small decisions, and they're just not as reliable as usual. So you can start to see these are behavioural changes, things that you can recognise. It's a matter of keeping attuned. The person may be reporting to you that they are more fatigued, more exhausted, or it may be that others spot this. Team leaders are become more aware that this person is extra tired. They may want to be sleeping more than usual. They may be having trouble getting to sleep at all. They may be so wired and so tired that they're finding they can't get to sleep and having sleep difficulties. Or when they do fall asleep, they're harder to wake up, and it may be that they turn up late to work. It could be that a person's more confrontational than usual, more argumentative. They might be a lot more critical. They might possibly, in some instances, seem more aggressive, verbally aggressive, and potentially physically aggressive in some extreme situations. A person might also be experiencing changes in appetite. There might be a sudden increased desire to eat or a decreased desire. So there may be unexplained weight loss or gain. The person may be starting to exhibit signs of anxiety, where they have excessive fear or worry about things going on. Where before, I mean, everyone has their moments of being anxious, don't they, from time to time, and that's normal in every workplace, wherever you work. But when you become aware that this is increasing, they might be checking and rechecking details and then contacting to just recheck again. They might be starting to worry about every potential problem that might happen. And it can be that they start to be really preoccupied by their worries. Now, the cause of these might be personal issues that you may not be aware of. But you can sometimes notice their behavior. A driver may start to be someone who's withdrawing from others. Social withdrawal is often a sign that someone's drawing into themselves to cope with things that are feeling a bit overwhelming. So they might be chatting less with their teammates. They might be avoiding contact with others. They might be very obviously spending a lot more time on their own. They might be harder to get in contact with. They might be replying to emails and requests more slowly than usual. Then you've got this dreaded element for anyone who's a driver or running a team of drivers, is the increased use of alcohol or drugs. There may be prescription drugs, gambling, other risk taking. It could be things like speeding, obviously getting in trouble with more speeding tickets from the police. Just evidence that things are getting really shaky for them. And one other thing is just apathy. When someone who was always pretty motivated and pretty onto it, when they start to lose interest in activities that they've always enjoyed, that's brought them pleasure, that their lives seem to be getting a bit flatter, a bit smaller. They just seem to be flat, really, and they don't care. They don't care like they did before. And in some instances, when it gets really bad, when someone's mental unwellness gets really bad, we can see signs of essentially hopelessness, feeling like their job's lost any meaning or purpose for them, life's lost its purpose. They can start to seem very negative. They might be seeing the dark side of things rather than any hope. And for some, tragically, it may involve suicidal thinking, which, as you would imagine, is right down the red end of that continuum of well-being. Okay, so with all that being true, how do you support your driver's mental well-being? What can you do as a workplace leader, as an employer, to support their well-being? I mean, it's very clear that there's only so much you can do, because ultimately the driver themselves has responsibility too. But let's just think about what you can do. So I've got 6 steps for you. The first one is, I really encourage you first to look after your own stress management and your own mental wellness. To be able to do the role that you've got in caring for your drivers and supporting your drivers and ensuring that they feel good about your business, that they want to keep coming back and working and doing a good job for you. You need to make sure you're bringing your best game. You need to make sure that you're looking after your own stress management and mental wellness. Taking time during your workday, not just at home, but during your workday, to take those breaks, to get the basics right, to just find ways to calm and settle when you sense that you're getting wound up and wound up and wound up. Getting enough sleep and rest, all those basics. Let's not look first to our drivers. Let's always, as leaders, look first to ourselves. The second thing is to actively encourage your drivers to get the basics right every working day. Now, I'm guessing that a lot of you do encourage these things. I'll go through the list and then I'll share ways that you might think about how you could suggest they do this. So staying hydrated while driving, which helps with their focus and keeping alert. So when I say hydrated, I'm talking water here, not endless cups of coffee. Keeping water intake up through the day, eating healthy, using good snacks to keep energy off, and not hyperloading on junk food. Helping them to use their breaks well, spending a time away from their vehicle during the day, when they get breaks, to get out of the cab, to walk away from their vehicle, get some fresh air. Also get some exercise, even if it's just simple stretching, but getting out and moving. You will know very well the health challenges of a sedentary profession, such as those who do long haul trips as drivers across many kilometres with very few breaks out of their cab. Getting enough sleep. I should probably add getting enough rest, because we can rest but not sleep. But getting enough sleep, encouraging them to keep a healthy weight, encouraging them to find time to relax and unwind and enjoy life. When they're not at work, when they're taking breaks, to find that a really good time for themselves, encouraging them to connect with other people, which is always really important, to keep good relationships going, not only with you as a team of workers, with other drivers, with the people they report to, but also with their loved ones who they may be at a distance from, and encouraging them, if they get unwell, to see a doctor. The thing about these basic things is these are true. A lot of these are true for all of us, whether or not we're a driver. A lot of them are very true. And these are the basics of just everyday life, keeping physically well and mentally well. These are the foundation blocks, if you like, the building blocks you've got to get right. When we're stressed, when we're anxious, when we're really tired, interestingly, these are the things that we often compromise on. These are the things that we flag away and don't think are important. But actually, They are the most important things. So if you can find ways to give tips to your drivers in their trainings, in your communications with them, to weave in ways that you can remind them about these things, just so that it's always at the front of their mind that these are tips to being really healthy during their workday, both physically and mentally. The next thing I'd like to suggest is that you encourage your truckers, your drivers, to regularly check in with themselves, to ask themselves, how am I doing? Sometimes we can be so caught up in our work, so preoccupied with our schedules, with the tasks we have to do, that we don't take time to think, actually, how am I doing? When we help our drivers to do that, it helps build their awareness about their mental health, so that if things start to get a bit shaky, if they start to get out of balance, they're going to become more aware of that. And when they're more aware, they're going to be able to find some ways to get back into balance. One of the other things that I really recommend is that you, as a business, as a company, that you start to normalize mental health matters. It's very easy for stigma to sit alongside mental health, but in the last couple of decades, we've made tremendous strides in our community. And certainly here in New Zealand, as COVID-19 makes its impact felt, there are many campaigns that are emphasizing the importance of paying attention to our mental health. Why? Because mental health really does matter. And when we normalize discussions and conversations about keeping ourselves well physically and mentally, we're doing everybody a favor. So how could we go about doing this? Well, I suggest at the moment, especially during this crisis time, that you make the most of some of the campaigns that are available, either locally or nationally. These are two New Zealand campaigns, the All Right campaign and the Getting Through Together by the Mental Health Organisation. Many countries in the world are initiating these sorts of campaigns, and both these providers have free posters. They have free tip sheets that you can email out to staff. However you normally would contact your drivers, there are things that you can share with them which lets them know that you know that their mental health matters, and that it's normal to be concerned about keeping mentally well and healthy during your work day and during your work life. Here's an example of another option. This is the depression.org.nz website in New Zealand, which offers a phone line and a text line. Those text lines are often favoured over phones. This is a good kind of a resource if you become aware of what's available, that you normalise by, for example, having the links to these at the bottom of the odd newsletter out to your staff team, so that they know, because you've put it in that newsletter or you've put it in the communication, that you're interested and concerned for their well-being, and you want to help and support them if they're getting out of balance, if they're moving down towards that orange-red end of the mental health and wellbeing continuum. This is another example of a New Zealand phone line, a government phone line and text line 1737, a 24/7 text line, and many countries have a similar thing. Again, using your creative communication skills to think, how can you include this information regularly, not just during crisis times, but all the time, so that drivers know that this is an option if they want to speak to someone not in the workplace and they don't want to speak to loved ones. They can speak to someone like this. These are trained counsellors 24/7. So if they're on the road through the night, feeling really low, this is a place they can call if they feel they need to. Break, who's obviously the sponsor of this webinar, Break is an organisation that's important to know about too. If there has been a crash and if there have been injuries and fatalities, Break has some wonderful resources to support people, including drivers, through some of those tragic circumstances. By accessing these sorts of resources and making them available to your team at the right time when they're needed, again, it says to that driver, you know, my bosses care about me. They know that my mental health matters just as much as my physical safety. Victim support, again, around the world, there'll be different sorts of victim agencies, but victim support is also another organisation that will readily come alongside and support your drivers, and actually also your driver's family and loved ones if there has been a really difficult crash situation. And again, an organisation that's available, and reminding your team leaders about these sorts of organisations and these sorts of resources means you're giving them tools to be able to respond to situations as they arise. Another way to support your drivers is to ask them to participate in healthy driver training. So this is just one example in New Zealand, example of the healthy truck driver training, where drivers can go through the different topics, which includes, ta-da, mental health matters, right as part of that health picture, putting it front and center, knowing that fatigue, for example, slows our responsiveness, that fatigue slows our concentration, that fatigue can cause accidents. So in this training, for example, a driver can do it, you know, today using technology, they could do it on their phone, in their cab, you know, not when they're driving, obviously, but they can do that at any time. Finding a healthy driver training that highlights mental well-being as well as physical well-being is a really smart strategy, because it means that you're pointing to them, and that's letting them know that you're valuing their health and their mental health. But when they're doing it themselves, you're encouraging them to take some ownership about the steps that they can take. We can always encourage people to do these things. We can't make them take on necessarily all of the strategies, but when we normalize it and build it into our workplace life, and it could be that you do something like this in your own business, that you develop your own training, and it could be that you do refreshers every year, and it could be that those who are your administrative team who don't ever get in behind a wheel or do any driving, that you ask them also to do this training, so that everyone is aware of how much mental health matters to your business. Another thing that's really important is to have your driver wellbeing support policies and procedures in place and up to date. We don't want policies and procedures about how you're going to support workers who might need some extra help. We don't want that to be in a dusty old folder that no one ever looks at, or that was written in 1999. It needs to be annually reviewed at the very least. It needs to be easily accessible. And notice there I say train your leaders in these policies and procedures every year. Make sure they know what the policies and procedures are as team leaders, and then communicate these policies around staff wellbeing and any procedures or steps that drivers need to take if they need to access extra support from you as a business. Communicate that to them more than once in their work life. I went to one company recently who admitted that when they employ new people, they get their employees on their first day to read all their policies and procedures and tick and sign that they've read them, and they never see them again. When it comes to staff wellbeing, the evidence is clear that if an employee, such as your drivers, if they know that there is a policy or a procedure that they can access if they need extra help, they feel better about working at that organisation. And why do you think that is? It's because, let's face it, it's because they feel valued. They feel that you've noticed that their mental well-being is as important as their physical well-being and their driving skills and all the other things they contribute to you. So get those policies out, dust them off. In many countries of the world, such as New Zealand, Employers have now legal responsibilities to support the well-being of employees, including ensuring a reasonable level of stress in the workplace and not an unreasonable level, and to put steps in place to support those employees who are really struggling. Particularly, of course, if what they're struggling with is work-related or work caused within a work context. Look, the road through this current crisis has never been driven before, so there's lots of uncertainty around the world, but we do know that drivers are going to be needed in every community. They're going to be needed in every region, every country of the world. They are really game changers for economies, and you know this. But although we haven't been through this crisis before, you'll have been through other crises before. So regardless of what season we find ourselves in, you have an opportunity to strengthen the resilience of your driver team. And in doing that, you will strengthen your workplace culture when you actively support the mental health and well-being of your drivers in a way that will have positive ripple effects now and for the years to come. For example, if a driver who right now in your business is very fatigued, if they are feeling really flat and low, if they're developing a type of depression, if you open a window and a door to them to find a pathway through your policies and your procedures, through the way that the team leaders talk to them and support them, through the communications you give, if you show them that mental health matters to you because their well-being is tied up in how well they can do their job, if you let them know that and remind them of that, not only will you improve the well-being of that driver by facilitating steps they can take to get things back into balance and to get further towards the green end of the continuum of well-being rather than going towards the orange and red end. If you do that, you not only improve that driver's life, but you decrease the risk of crashes, of vehicle damage. You decrease the risk of injuries and fatalities. You decrease the risk of losing a driver because he walks away from the job. You decrease the risk of low staff morale, team morale. You decrease the risk of business costs when schedules are disrupted, when staff walk away from the job. So it's a real win-win, as you can tell. Working as I have in a range of businesses over the years, I am so clear in my mind that I've seen what the evidence also teaches us, that when our workplace leaders invest in us and our well-being in the workplace, it increases loyalty, increases morale, improves workplace culture, and ultimately even improves the brand of an organisation, because people want to work there because they know they care about their drivers, they care about their employees. So as leaders, we need to not just talk about this, we need to walk our talk. We need to definitely do that, because our team can always tell the difference if we're all just full of it and we've got all the nice words, or if we really follow through. And when you do, when you follow through, oops, going backwards here, when you follow through, even on the most difficult roads for your drivers, whether it's, you know, roads like this that are physically different and challenging and almost impossible to drive, or whether it's their personal road that they're really struggling on, you're going to be making a difference, a really enormous difference to road safety and to driver safety. So thank you.
Hi, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm coming to you from Christchurch, where it's turned into a beautiful day. And like Carolyn said, I'm just looking to give a bit of a flavour for some of the things that Fulton Hogan's got in place to support wellbeing for its drivers. And just to put a bit of perspective into the risk. So Whanahōgen has about 5,000 staff in New Zealand and about 3,500 light and heavy vehicles. It also travels about 100 million kilometres per year. And at that level of travel, I worked out the level of exposure there equals, it actually works out to be quite a significant amount of travel of a proportion of national travel, and within that, that means that just by sheer volume of travel that we're likely to be involved in road incidents or crashes. And to illustrate that, some of the incidents or crashes that Whanahōgen have been involved in recent years, a runaway truck on a work site which unfortunately collided with a worker. A truck driver was driving through an intersection. A pedestrian ran out in front of a truck driver. A car went through an intersection and collided with a truck driver, which was unfortunately fatal. And quite recently, we had a truck pull over to the side of the road to take a photo, and it was we could almost call this one a near miss, but it was an actual crash. But it was had a passing glance with a car that had veered to the shoulder of the road, and a light truck was rear-ended by a heavy truck at quite significant speed. They were looking to sort of temper speed through a roadwork site. So Whanahōgen does get involved in a number of quite serious incidents, and a lot of that is down to just the sheer volume of traffic that driving that we're involved in. And some of the points that I'd raise in that is a lot of our drivers, it's not necessarily their state of mind that can involve, they can be in a really great state of mind and still bad things can happen. And so some of our support is really around mental wellbeing, is really around what happens after an incident as well as preventativeness. Some of the key things that I wanted to talk about today was our Living in Safely manual, our wellbeing resources, and our restart and safety days. So our Living Safety manual, that is really a simplified version to encapsulate our entire health and safety system. And it focuses really strongly on our life-saving rules and critical risks. So again, this is really around trying to distill down quite carefully and simply what the key aspects of our business are that's really important to avoid the most serious consequences for our staff and our customers. And it recognises the importance of health and well-being at the highest level. It recognises the need to be drug and alcohol free when we're working as the most critical risk. But it also does recognise the importance of fatigue, prescription medication, drugs and alcohol, stress and mental health, and personal health. And that's that's recognising those aspects at the highest level of our health and safety system. The next element that I would like to talk about is our wellbeing resources. So because Whanahōgen is such a large organisation, it's got sort of a logistical issue with getting nationally or getting policies and procedures distributed right down to the grassroots level. And the way that we do that is we basically have nationally supported resources, and we share those down with the team leaders at a regional level, and then the regional levels pick and choose and make those resources relevant to their specific business needs. And the sort of information that gets distributed from nationally downwards tends to be quite topical. So a really good example of that is COVID-19. So our national team has put together a pack of resources to support our regional teams with their response to COVID-19. And then the regional teams will take that pack of information and modify it and expand on it and make it relevant to their teams and distribute it. And in particular, our wellbeing resources, they're very strongly linked to the Mental Health Foundation's 5 Ways to Wellbeing. So just on this slide, I've just provided there's a link and a bit more information and some really great resources available from this website that we, I guess, borrow heavily from. We also run an assistance employee program, which is confidential. Essentially, it's a counselling service that we make available for all our staff, and listed there is just some of the, I guess, most common reasons why, or some of the causes for people to pick up on that particular service. And another thing, the next thing I'd like to talk about, which is a really effective way of communicating some key information around wellbeing down to our staff, is our restart and safety days. So our leadership team recognised that there were clusters of crashes at certain times of years, and in particular around the new year and also in early spring when our construction activities really ramp up. And so it's kind of like a start of season thing. So we have a really heavy focus on pulling our teams together at the start of the year and in early spring, and we call that restart and safety days. And so the idea is really to sort of start this key period, it's kind of like starting the season with the right mindset. And so our days generally are a full day, and that day will be split up into multiple sessions. And those sessions can focus on, I guess, machinery orientated tasks, but the sessions would definitely some sessions would definitely have a really strong focus on mental well-being. And so what often happens in a session is we'll have a video presentation. So that will be something that's often set up by our national team. And videos might go for only 5 or 10 minutes, and they just give a really great representation, and they're often dramatized by actors who come from Fold & Hogan, sort of providing an example of the sorts of things that could happen. And it just, by doing that, it is a really consumable, not interactive, but engaging way, and it's made really relevant by people that you might know within the organization. And we also borrow heavily on case studies, so either dramatization of what could happen, or in some cases we actually use real events that might have happened in a different locality to give a really good understanding of the possible things that could happen. And just to cement the topic, it's often ended with a discussion to allow questions and get a dialogue going between people within the region to get an understanding of the field. And some good examples of sessions that were held in recent safety days is around states of error. So this is looking at the states of mind that you can be in that lead to an increased likelihood of an incident happening. And so those are around rushing, frustration, fatigue, and complacency. And we had a really great video on that and acted out with some examples to show what the consequence of being in a state of mind that can lead to errors. And I think everybody sort of found that really relatable. Another really great one was a case study of a person who was in a really poor state of mind, and one of his co-workers actually picked up on it and just sort of had a chat with him. And as it turned out, he sort of discovered that he was in a really tough mindset, and things really weren't looking good for him. And with the support of his co-worker, they managed to really get a lot of support, and it was a complete turnaround for this particular person. And it was just a really great way of, I guess, being able to show role modeling of supporting somebody, looking out for your mates, and supporting somebody through a really tough situation. We've also had sessions on mindfulness, and motivational speakers often play a role as well. And just looking at some of the ways that that information is rolled out to our teams. I just pulled out some of these things that I think is really important to the success of, I guess, supporting workers' well-being, and I think the key one is culture. And what I really mean by that is it's quite a big thing to actually for somebody to feel you need to be quite vulnerable to, I guess, to let people know that you're not in a like a healthy state of mind. And being able to do that is heavily dependent on having a high level of trust between your co-workers, and having a team environment where it demonstrates or that creates that level of trust is really, really important for the ability for people to be able to talk freely about how they're feeling. The next one I'd like to talk about is accessibility. So the information has got to be accessible, and it's not always easy if somebody at the coalface is struggling about where they can get information from and where they can turn to help. And it's really important that organisations make that information accessible in a way that's relevant to their staff, which leads on nicely to the next one. And these last three next to are quite closely related, but it's relevant and relatable. So the information that we're sharing to support their well-being, it really has to be relevant to the types of situations that they could be exposed to, and making it relatable. So by using things like videos or examples that involve perhaps a close co-worker or somebody who they can relate to, really helps strengthen the message and allows the messages to be, I guess, sink in. And timely is really important as well. So I mentioned around the timing of our clusters of crashes around the new year and around our construction timeframe. And COVID is another example that you need to be quite nimble in terms of getting the information right down to the grassroots where it's needed at the right time. So hopefully that's a helpful summary of where things are at and some of the things that Folden and Hogan have been doing in the mental health state